Finally, to summarise, what the UK must face up to is its real economic problems. The status quo is not sustainable, and austerity is absolutely not the route to prosperity or balanced books. We need to increase our exports, reduce our imports, and actually pay our way in the world.
If this country continues to rack up huge trade deficits, as it done in the past, I don't think it's sustainable. At some point you will get to the point where other people who actually finance the deficit at the moment will say this country is not sustainable.
Since I started working in the city in October 1985, one of the best lead indicators for any country anywhere in the world is their trade and current account deficit. If it is large and continues to remain large, then it's a good lead indicator often of potential problems in that country or issues that need to be addressed. For Britain, I think the trade and current account deficit can be sustained in the sense that international investors still have confidence in Britain, but they highlight underlying issues that do need to be sort of brought to the fore, and in particular the need to rebalance the economy. So I think the trade and current account deficit are very important signals, and we should spend more time focusing not only on them, but on the lessons that come from them.
The clearest route to achieving this is by having a more competitive exchange rate, allowing the economy to be rebalanced with a much bigger chunk of our economy moving into manufacturing. This has very clear benefits, not just for the trade deficit, but for the country and its citizens as a whole.
I don't think you can go on running a big trade deficit forever. Sooner or later, you'll run out of the assets that you have to sell to finance it, or run out of the borrowing capacity you've got, and the pound will fall. It seems to me to be much more sensible to recognise the dangers we're in and to get the exchange rate to some more realistic level early, rather than wait until in the end the markets just turn against us and the pound crashes.
Firstly, running a large trade deficit just cannot go on forever. A correction is needed. Secondly, a push towards more manufacturing would provide many of the decent and stable jobs that our country is desperate for. Thirdly, this would stimulate growth and increases in productivity, both essential for clearing the deficit and raising wages, living standards, and the tax base.
So all of these issues come together. What it means is that you need to look beyond austerity. You need to try and have some quick wins, but more importantly, it's about a longer term structural approach, about the economy saving more and investing more and competing globally so that our exports of goods and services can continue to do well in the fast growing global markets of the future.
I think a lot of the trouble is that our macroeconomic policies have been out of balance. I mean, any government really should look at its balance between monetary policy on the one hand and fiscal policy on the other hand, so they actually do try and engineer one way or another a competitive exchange rate. The exchange rate shouldn't just be ignored when a government is thinking about balancing monetary and fiscal policy. And there have been at least a couple of times in our history when the currency has been ridiculously overvalued, mainly because we've been running huge, high interest rates very much at the expense of the exchange rate. I remember it was the early 80s and when we were in the ERM in the early 90s, and I remember criticising it very hard at the time, but nobody seemed to bother.
And finally, considerable evidence now exists that flogging all your national assets is damaging to the economy. Reducing the tax base, reducing jobs in research and development, and reducing democratic control. Free market dogma simply hasn't worked in the real world. Restricting such asset sales would not only aid the exchange rate, it would have far wider economic benefits.
I think the result of the EU referendum last summer was a real wake-up call for this country, that we cannot go on running our affairs the way we have done for many years, that we really need some radical changes. And I think the most important change of all we need to make is to make the economy more competitive so that we can pay our way in the world.
It really is time for Britain to get a grip on its economy. Politicians talk about a strong pound. It may be strong for the city, but for ordinary people and workers, nothing would improve our economy more than moving to a much more competitive pound. Better jobs, better wages, better security, a better country?
I think politicians who praise a strong pound just simply don't understand how the economy works.